And a good midweek morning, Eagles fans. Appreciate you getting in with us here on Birds 365. We're streaming with the Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald, and we'll shoot the breeze on the Birds for the next 2 hours right here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Johnny Mac, when I was picking out what shirt I was going to wear today, I said, you know what? Let me go with the Temple Cherry and Red.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The Eagles have added another former Temple coach to their coaching staff for the upcoming season. We'll give you the details of that coming up in just a sec. But first things first, when free agency kicked in and the Eagles had as many guys eligible for free agency as they did, they kept some very important ones. They've lost some key guys, or so it looks. They were going to have to bring in some guys from outside the organization to fill in some of the voids on this roster. Well, they did that at one position yesterday with the addition of Nick Morrow, former Bear and Raider linebacker, who comes in here to Philly to potentially grab one of the two starting linebacker spots since they lost both of their starting linebackers via free agency. It looks good on paper. The guy had well over 100 tackles this year. And the note that jumped out to me was, John, that he played every defensive snap for the Chicago Bears this year. Talk about a guy who answers the bell, gets out there on the field. Certainly Nick Morrow did that. No Pro Bowl mentions, no All Pros. Seems like a solid linebacker. What have you been able to unearth on what Nick Morrow brings to the Eagle linebacking core?
Well, he comes from that football factory, Greenville University.
Yeah, see, I didn't even know what colors they were. Had I known, I might have dug in for a T-shirt with those
That's
colors.
true. You should have won Greenville University instead
of
Temple.
What color do they wear, John?
I have no idea.
Yeah, neither do I. That's what I thought.
Obviously, not, look, I mean, the Eagles are sort of draft proofing their roster right now. And by that, I mean, you never want to go in the draft saying, I need a linebacker. I need a safety. So you have to bring in bodies. And I think they're in that portion of the off season. He does have experience playing. He started in the NFL, as you mentioned, played a lot last year for a bad team. 17 games, started all 17. So durability is nice. When you don't have any experience, and that's where the Eagles basically are. I mean, Nakobe Dean, for all his upside, played, I think, 32 snaps, defensive snaps last year. Christian Ellis, special teamer, nice story. And people are high on him. Sean Bradley, Davion Taylor. Davion, I think, has started 7 games. He would be, the old vets in the linebacker room. So Nicholas Morrow comes in with experience and playing style. But boy, as I read up on him, 6 foot, 216 pounds. Boy, I get an Eric Wilson sort of taste in my mouth. Obviously he can run a little bit. Well, you should be able to run. But I don't think this is much like we said yesterday at safety. I don't think this is the end of linebacker, but they needed some kind of veteran presence, some kind of placeholder, and he'll get an opportunity to compete. That's been the definition of the guys the Eagles have added. They'll get an opportunity to compete, but if they find somebody better, they find somebody better, and there's not much risk involved in moving on. I think this is another player in that category is basically where I would go with Nicholas Morrow.
What we don't know yet is what the terms of the deal are. We know it's a 1-year deal. How much above the veteran minimum is it going to be? We're certainly going to comp them to the 2 linebackers that left in TJ Edwards and Kaiser White. Basically comes down to a trade of TJ Edwards for Morrow, with Morrow making what we assume to be significantly less. And that's an important part of this puzzle here, in that the Eagles have the cap situation they're in right now. They decided they couldn't afford to keep TJ Edwards at what his salary was going to be, so they bring in a cheaper version. Can he be a reasonable facsimile? We're going to have to wait and see. Wait till he gets out there on the field to see if that's the case. But you did beat me to the punch because I remember last year when I was over the moon with the addition of Nakobe Dean, you did point out that, Jody, you do realize he's a little on the smaller side. And that's the reason why he dropped down into the third round, because I thought he was a borderline first round talent, certainly a second round talent. Couldn't believe the Eagles got him in the third. But for NFL linebacker size, he's slightly undersized. Well, Nick Morrow's even smaller. So if you're going to put the two of them together, Nakobe Dean playing last year aside, TJ Edwards might have been okay, because TJ Edwards is your big linebacker, was and could have been if he had chosen to stay here in Philadelphia. Now you're putting someone who's even smaller than Nakobe Dean next to him on the field. As of right now, you're right. We still got a lot of offseason to go. Maybe the Eagles add another linebacker via free agency, maybe trade. Maybe they actually pick a linebacker reasonably high in the draft. I'll have to wait and see on that. But as of right now, the two guys who would look to be their starters, you would project to be their starters, both a little on the smallish side, JM.
Yeah, and maybe, Christian Ellis develops and or Davion Taylor turns the corner.
Davion's not a big guy either, though.
Well, he's bigger than these guys. He's bigger than the two guys you mentioned, significantly bigger. He's not huge. He's not TJ, but he's 230. He's got a little bit more height on him. So maybe one of those guys develop a little bit, and they can go in that direction. Maybe they get somebody in the draft, as you mentioned. But you always got to worry about startup costs there. Hey, going back to last off season. I thought it was a theme. I talked about it a lot. I said, this team's really undersized, and it went past linebacker, and you still had TJ Edwards. But I was talking about Kaiser White. I was talking about Hassan Reddick up front, because he's very small for the position he plays. You're moving a slot corner to play safety. How is run support going to look? And they overcame it, but they weren't a great tackling team. I think they got better. They were really bad that week one in Detroit. And you said, oh boy, they were a really bad tackling team, and they got better. They slowly got better. Another indication they just do not care about stopping the run, or it's about, Jordan Davis or Linval Joseph. If they can get Linval back, if he even wants to play, if they get Noah Ellis, who's Christian's brother, up to speed, he's 350 pounds. That player, whoever that player is, and it's going to be Jordan Davis, but that player, and I've said it from day one, is really, really important in this defensive philosophy, because those guys are responsible for basically keeping offensive linemen off of these 220-pound linebackers. And that's really, really important, because you could see it from the other side. You see what happens when Jason Kelce gets to second level. I mean, good night. That's what they're trying to do in Philadelphia. Keep that guy on the other side. And luckily, there's not many Jason Kelce's, but you saw it a little bit in the Super Bowl with Creed Humphrey. Creed's, a really good player. And when he got to the second level, it was an issue. That's what they're trying to do. And that's why that position is so important. And it's even going to be more important because you don't have TJ Edwards now.
True. And they're banking on their linebackers, whoever they may be, being playmakers, and you got to give them a chance to make plays. I think Nakobe Dean's going to be able to do that. You can trust the Eagles roster for as much as you think you can. You and I have been doing this a long time. What they write down or type in on their roster as size for players doesn't always necessarily match up. But they list Nakobe Dean at 231 pounds, which is the same as Christian Ellis, which is 15 more than the linebacker they added yesterday. And Davion Taylor is 230 pounds. So they've got three linebackers listed basically at the same exact thing. 230.
With all due respect, I see those guys every day during the season, and Nakobe Dean is nowhere near the size of Davion Taylor or Christian Ellis. Nowhere near the size. So take those listed weights, crumple them up, throw them in the circular pile. I mean, nowhere near. It's not even as tall. I mean, they're given, they do it all the time. They do it more in college. They give some guys a few inches, a few pounds. But yeah, not close, Jody. Not close.
I just felt I needed to note that, even though I know exactly where you're coming from, and I tend to agree. And Nakobe's not even 6 foot. If we're talking height, then he is certainly the smallest of the bunch. A guy like Christian Ellis is certainly bigger, but they put them both down at the same exact weight of 231 pounds. I don't know if Nakobe added a solid 10 pounds of muscle during the year. He wasn't playing all that much, so he should spend all that much more time in the weight room, John. Maybe put on 10 pounds of muscle like Alex Bohm.
And by the way, Nakobe's game is about instincts. And I thought the one game where he did play a little bit, he showed incredible instincts and all that stuff. His game is about getting to the football, before. And look, he played at Georgia. Who was at Georgia with him? Jordan Davis. That was the whole point. Jordan Davis takes up blockers. Nakobe's free to get to the football, and it worked out beautifully at the college level. That's what you're trying to replicate at the pro level. That's the same thing. You're trying to keep offensive linemen off them. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. He's a small guy for playing linebacker, but it's a different era of the NFL. It's not 1985 where you need the big, powerful in between who's going to go downhill and take on blockers and stop running backs. It's about more of a spread game, athletic game, and all that stuff Nakobe does very, very, very well. But he's undersized. He's very small. And to the point where if you see him, you go, that's a linebacker. It's one of those things.
And one of the things that does scare me about the Eagles linebacker core as it is right now, and again, still very early in the offseason, certainly the possibility of change. I don't think it's a great group for covering. That's why I'm okay with the Morrow signing yesterday, because he's a flat-out tackler. When you move on from Kaiser White and TJ Edwards, I thought both of them were TJ well above average tackler and Kaiser White a darn good tackler. And I thought Kaiser White was a pretty good coverage linebacker as well. TJ was a much improved coverage linebacker because the year before, and when he was filling in the year before that, I think he was okay at best. Some tight ends were able to outmaneuver him. He's not going to be asked to cover any guys in the slot or wideouts or stuff like that. But backs, tight ends, not great at it. Oh, I think he absolutely improved at it during his time here in Philadelphia. I did see a stat that the passer rating against Nick Morrow last year was in excess of 100, like 105, which is not great. That's if you've got an undersized guy, you would think that one of his strengths is his ability to cover guys out of the backfield. Not necessarily so. And you've got a new defense coordinator. We believe he's much like the old defensive coordinator in that he's going to be running his version of the Nick Fangio defense. We don't know how much they're going to lean on linebackers to cover. I think they're going to have extra D-backs on the field a lot. So it's going to be some, but not an over amount. You expect the linebackers still to have to be able to be pretty damn good in coverage on this team, don't you, John?
I do think people overestimate. Like, I don't know who they're looking for. Like, when you put out numbers like passer rating for linebackers, most of them are pretty bad, to be honest. Even the good coverage linebackers are pretty bad. It's a mismatch from an offensive perspective, typically. It's really difficult. But when you have a linebacker that can make things more difficult, that's sort of what you're looking for. A smart linebacker. I would say Jack Del Rio is one of the best nickel linebackers I ever saw. Different era. Couldn't run a lick, but he was just so smart. He was always in the right spot. In that, especially when you're playing as much zone, and I think if anything, the Eagles are going to play more zone, which is going to upset people. But that's really important, communication, and that's where Nakobe Dean, because Nakobe's a really, really smart kid, really smart. And I don't think he's going to have any issues with stuff like that. I think he's going to be in the right spot, and that helps. And to give Morrow as an example, you say the passer rating, well, that looks bad. He was, if you go to PFF, he was 38 out of 70 in coverage, which is okay. That's not bad. 38 out of 70.
Bottom half.
It's mediocre. But when you get to the point as a run defender, 74 out of 85. Like, he can't stop the run at all, which is no surprise at 200.
How the hell did he get 115 tackles if he's that bad against
the
run?
If you're tackling 7 yards down the field, you're not effective, Jody. I mean, you're making a tackle. The old Eric Wilson quote I loved, and that's why I keep saying it. It's like a 20-point score on a bad NBA team. That's what I got on Eric Wilson. When you have a bad team, somebody's got to do something when it comes to filling up the box score. And if you're tackling somebody 7 yards down the field, well, that's in the box score, but it's not really an effective play. And he's not an effective run support player. He's better in coverage, at least when you compare it. But linebackers as a whole, they don't cover that well. Even the good ones, they don't cover that well. I mean, that's not the strength of their game, and that's one of the issues. And that's why people around the NFL try to get more defensive backs on the field. And we're down to 2 linebackers playing the majority of the plays. And a lot of teams go to 1 linebacker. Why? Because they're trying to cover people. And linebackers in general can't cover people. And he's better than most at coverage. He's not better than most in run support.
All right. I give credit for guys tackling. And the Bears defense this past year, if he's making tackles 7 or 8 yards down the field, it's probably because one of those offensive linemen got to the second level and is trying to block him, because you talk about a team without a front. The Bears were so bad. They fell apart when they traded Robert Quinn. And then we got to see Robert Quinn. He can't play anymore. And that was like a massive loss for the Bears. That's how bad their defensive front was. So I'll put it more on them than our new Eagle linebacker, Mr. Morrow, in his ability to stop the run. Hey, John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We are Mac and Mac. Got 2 good Eagle guests lined up for you today. First up is Mike Gill. We might do just a quick commentary on Clearwater, because Gill was down in Clearwater looking at the little Phillies before we get into the Eagles. And a little bit later, Bo Wolf, Johnny's compatriot in the Eagles beat core, will jump aboard. Haven't had Bo on in probably over a month now, so it'll be good to catch up with him. So we got 2 good guests coming your way. We hope you stick around. Don't even think about going anywhere. Stay streaming in with us here on Birds 365.
Go to get your